In July 1944, British intelligence finalized a highly detailed plot to parachute a sniper into Germany and assassinate Adolf Hitler. The target location was his remote Bavarian retreat, where security thinned out during his daily, isolated mountain walks. But Winston Churchill and the intelligence community deliberately canceled the operation. They realized that killing Hitler would actually help Germany win the war. Nazi propaganda had successfully painted him as a military mastermind, the sole architect of the rapid blitzkrieg that swept across Europe. The reality inside the German high command was entirely different. The Führer was a paranoid, drug-addicted micromanager making increasingly disastrous decisions on every front. By opening the dossier of his catastrophic blunders, we can see exactly how the architect of Europe's conquest became the primary reason for its collapse, and the Allies' greatest strategic asset. Let's open the first evidence file, emotion over strategy. In the late summer of 1940, the German Luftwaffe was systematically dismantling the Royal Air Force by relentlessly bombing British airfields. Then, a few stray British bombs accidentally hit the outskirts of Berlin. Thrown into a blind rage, Hitler ordered his Air Force to abandon the airfields and bomb London out of sheer vengeance. Relieving the pressure on those military bases gave the British fighter wings the critical reprieve they needed to repair their planes, take back to the skies, and win the Battle of Britain. We see this exact same emotional frailty in 1942 on the Eastern Front. Hitler divided his advancing forces in the Caucasus purely to capture a city that bore the name of his ideological rival, Joseph Stalin. This vanity project dragged his highly mobile, mechanized army into a static, brutal urban meat grinder. Among the shattered bricks of Stalingrad, German tactical advantages evaporated. His inability to separate personal pride from cold military objectives repeatedly saved his enemies from certain defeat. The second evidence file reveals his delusional logistics. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa to invade the Soviet Union in 1941, he boasted of an unstoppable, hyper-modern mechanized force. This diagram reveals the true German army composition. A staggering 70. He based this decision on a gross underestimation of American manufacturing, voluntarily adding an untouchable industrial juggernaut capable of producing 16 million soldiers and endless rows of armor to his list of active enemies. A leader completely detached from the physical realities of supply lines and production output was waging a war on paper that could never be won in the mud. The third evidence file exposes his paralyzing micromanagement. As the war began to turn against Germany, Hitler stripped his seasoned generals of battlefield autonomy, issuing strict orders that forbade any tactical retreats. General Friedrich Paulus obeyed this decree at Stalingrad. Instead of breaking out when he had the chance, he held his ground until his entire Sixth Army was surrounded, dooming hundreds of thousands of men to starvation and capture. This forced rigidity caused mass casualties across multiple fronts, including North Africa, where elite Axis troops were ordered to fight from indefensible positions until over 100,000 of them were forced to surrender. But the ultimate cost of this micromanagement came on the morning of June 6, 1944. As Allied forces stormed Normandy's beaches, the German defensive line desperately needed heavy armor. Germany had 10 panzer divisions in France capable of repelling the invasion, but they were frozen in place because Hitler was asleep. He had left strict orders not to be woken, and no other officer had the authority to release the tanks. By the time he finally woke up, the Allies had secured the beachhead. Europe's fate hinged entirely on one man's sleep schedule. By concentrating all decision-making power at the very top, Hitler decapitated his own military command structure, rendering it completely unresponsive to real-time threats. By late 1944, the German high command had been purged of anyone willing to tell the truth. The inner circle was now composed entirely of terrified sycophants who fed the dictator an illusion of impending victory. Acting on this false confidence, he launched a final, desperate offensive in the Ardennes forest. It was an impossible gamble, relying on terrible weather to ground Allied planes, and demanding troops capture their own fuel from the enemy just to keep advancing. The offensive collapsed the moment the skies cleared. This reckless push completely drained the Third Reich's last remaining reserves of manpower and armor, breaking the back of the German military. By the spring of 1945, the propaganda myth was shattered. The heavily defended empire he promised would last 1,000 years was overrun. A close look at his military record shows he was never a modern strategic genius. He was a First World War-era thinker whose early bluffs happened to succeed, leading to a fatal overconfidence in his own infallibility. The Allies won because absolute power concentrated in a flawed individual is a self-destruct mechanism. British intelligence made the correct calculation in 1944. Keeping Hitler in charge, with his unchecked ego and incompetence, was far deadlier to Germany than an Allied bullet ever could be.